An emergency broadcast on television announces the existence of a new virus that has appeared at an airport. Infected people become incredibly violent, and soon the airport is in flames. 2 months later, the virus has spread all over the world and has become a global pandemic that transforms people into zombie-like beings called ferals, who are seen as furious beasts. The government attempts to establish a quarantine, but many citizens protest and fight for the rights of wild animals, insisting that they too are people. The military has to take to the streets and fight against civilians in an effort to send them home, only to worsen the situation. One afternoon, all television channels lose their signals. Abigail and her brother receive a call from their father, the pilot, who explains that he has a lot of work to do to help people and promises that they will be safe with their mother. At that moment, they hear a noise coming from upstairs, so the family runs out of the house. Just as they are about to get into the car, a wild animal jumps and attacks the mother, killing her. Abigail immediately hides under the car and has to watch as the wild creature also attacks her brother. When a police siren begins sounding nearby, the wild animal flees. Soon after, Abigail hears her brother calling her by name, but her mother transforms into a wild creature and ends up killing him. When Abigail cries, her mother hears her and goes after her, only for Cassius to almost shoot her. He rescues Abigail, and she thanks him with a hug. Meanwhile, her brother also begins to transform, so Cassius makes Abigail close her eyes before shooting the child as well. 10 years later, the world is in a post-apocalyptic state. Few humans remain, and nature has taken over the cities. In the forest, Abigail and Cassius, now teenagers, are hunting. It is clear that Cassius has trained Abigail well because she kills a deer with an excellently aimed shot, although Cassius scolds her for being hasty and not patient enough. When night falls, the duo stops to camp, and Cassius makes sure that all the tripwires are in place. A few hours after falling asleep, one of the tripwires makes a noise and startles Cassius. He leaves the tent to investigate and finds some lint caught on the wire. Then he hears some noises nearby, so he hurries to keep the horses calm and draws his weapon just in time to shoot an approaching wild zombie, probably a scout sent by the horde. Cassius wakes Abigail so that she can leave. Over the following days, the duo continues traveling, and every time they stop to let the horse rest, Cassius keeps training Abigail. One afternoon, they stop riding when they see a car nearby and quickly draw their weapons. They see a man taking down a wild animal, while a second creature approaches him from behind. Abigail wants to help him, but shoots too quickly, and her bullet hits both him and the wild animal that was approaching. The creature in the car comes out to feed, and Cassius has to bring it down. Afterwards, Abigail searches the car for supplies. Picasso finishes off the poor man with a machete before taking his shoes. A radio in the car tries to contact the driver, and Abigail wants to warn him about the wild horde in the area, but Cassius tells her to ignore it. At that moment, more cars appear, and a group of survivors surrounds them with weapons. They examine the dead body and see that a human killed him, so they assume that the duo did it solely to rob him. When the leader threatens to kill them, Cassius and Abigail attack the two nearest people and knock them down to steal their weapons. The situation grows tense as both sides point their guns at each other until a pregnant woman named Megan steps out of a car to try to calm them. At that moment, the horses begin making distressed noises and a wild horde appears around them. Everyone opens fire immediately, killing as many wild creatures as possible to keep them at bay. There are too many, so despite their efforts, the wild creatures manage to get close, and Cassius and Abigail also have to use their swords in hand-to-hand combat against them. However, the other survivors are only adept with firearms, and soon the wild creatures begin killing them one by one. A woman prepares a Molotov cocktail, but is attacked by a wild creature, causing her to fall onto a car and trigger a small explosion that knocks Cassius backward. One of the survivors is bitten, so he tries to eliminate himself but runs out of bullets and transforms. The leader is grabbed by a particularly large wild creature and is slowly beaten to death, while Megan's husband, David, is also attacked by a wild dog but manages to kick it away. Abigail helps the couple into a car, and Cassius kills a few more creatures before joining them. When they take off, there is a wild animal on the roof of the car, so Cassius stops the vehicle abruptly to dislodge it. Abigail takes the opportunity to grab their belongings before they finally escape. The large wild creature realizes that they have killed its mate and roars in fury. Once on the road, Abigail checks their ammunition and realizes that most of it has been lost. Megan explains that they were traveling to a colony on the riverbank and that she is in her 35th week, so the baby is about to be born. However, Abigail and Cassius think that seeking colonies is not worthwhile. They have seen many of them and none ever survive. Suddenly, the car stops and the group discovers that the engine is dead, leaving them with no choice but to continue on foot. Moments later, the group reaches an abandoned town and decides to spend the night there, securing a building to ensure there are no wild creatures nearby and setting up camp. Megan offers to share her food, but Cassius and Abigail only eat what they hunt to avoid infection. The couple explains that they spoke with the colony over the radio, so they know that the colony has plenty of supplies and medical personnel. However, it takes a week to reach there, meaning the risk is high. In exchange, Abigail tells them that she and Cassius are trying to reach the west coast and escape to the islands by boat. After Cassius installs the tripwires outside, he takes out a map and tells the couple which route to take to reach the colony, but they refuse to accompany them, saying that the horde will return for revenge. Abigail speaks with Cassius privately, insisting that they should help the couple and that perhaps this colony will be different. A discussion ensues, but Cassius still refuses to help. In the middle of the night, the horde finds the broken-down car and follows the path toward the city. Meanwhile, the men cannot sleep, so Cassius shows David that he always has a spare bullet in his pocket in case he gets bitten. David only has a cigarette and a twisted ankle. They chat for a while and end up forming a bond, which persuades Cassius to agree to help them reach the colony the next morning. Abigail hears a noise and goes downstairs to investigate. Suddenly, a wild creature attacks her and makes her drop her weapon, but she is still able to quickly kill it with her machete. A second wild creature begins chasing her down the stairs, and Abigail uses a broken window to hurl the creature out of the building. She nearly falls herself, but Cassius catches her just in time. When the horde arrives at the building, the group has already left. A wild creature trips over a cable and triggers a small explosion that kills it. Sometime later, Abigail recognizes the area they're in and remembers that there is a civilian airport nearby where her father used to fly a light plane. Cassius wants to keep moving and thinks that an airport would make it easier for the horde to corner them, not to mention that probably all the airplanes have disappeared. However, Abigail and the couple vote in favor of going there, so Cassius has no choice but to follow them. After walking for a while, they find an old building and a car with a man who was recently shot. Cassius tells Abigail to search the building for supplies, but she refuses to stop to rest because she believes they are not alone. Abigail only finds some coffee and does not see the family hidden in one of the rooms. Cassius checks the trunk of the car and finds a wheelchair, which they use to transport Megan. After the group leaves, the horde finds the building and massacres the family completely within seconds. When they finally arrive at the airport, there are no planes around. David and Cassius begin arguing about how to proceed, but Abigail interrupts them when she finds her father's hangar. Fortunately, there is a plane inside, and David has the mechanical knowledge needed to fix it. While he works, Cassius and Abigail search the building. Abigail finds a photo of herself with her father on the floor and hangs it back on the wall. At that moment, the horde arrives, so the group hastily boards the plane, even though it is not yet ready. Cassius opens fire to slow down the horde, and David manually spins the propeller to help the plane take off. Abigail's knowledge of flying is limited, and the plane is slow, so the horde is closing in too quickly. Fortunately, they soon find the right buttons, and the plane begins to gain speed. A wild creature manages to cling to the door, and Cassius has to shoot it to make it fall off. Then the plane takes off, and the group manages to escape. However, they only fly for a few moments before the plane begins to malfunction and descend. Abigail tries to land, but the plane crashes against a cluster of trees and falls to the ground. Fortunately, it lands on its wheels, and everyone survives with only a few injuries. There is a train station nearby, so after ensuring that it is empty, they decide to rest there. Cassius takes out the map and discovers that it will take them 2 days to reach the colony, so they will depart at dawn. Abigail counts their ammunition and realizes that there isn't much left. Megan and Cassius share some food, and Cassius admits that Abigail reminds him of his wife. He reveals that he had to kill his infected family, and that later she self-eliminated because she could not bear it any longer. Cassius also shares the story of a boy from his hometown who was bitten. Since the wound did not affect any major artery, it took a couple of days for him to fully transform. Meanwhile, David finds a private place to examine his ankle and reveals that it is not twisted. The wound is actually from a bite, and David knows that he should isolate himself the next day. The group continues moving as they walk under the scorching sun. David feels quite sick, and Cassius notices blood on his leg. They wait until the women are far ahead to push David against a tree and examine his ankle to confirm their suspicion. Cassius gives him the option of telling everyone on his own terms, but if he doesn't do it soon, he will shoot him at night. The group finds a house with the lights on, and as they approach, a voice asks what they want. Cassius thinks it is too dangerous, but Abigail steps forward and explains that they need help, swearing that they mean no harm and mentioning the pregnant woman. Norton opens the door and points a gun at them, asking them to leave all their weapons in the trunk outside. Then he invites them in with a very sweet and welcoming demeanor. Cassius points out that the house has electricity, and Norton explains that he is an engineer and has built devices that provide electricity and hot water. He also mentions a wife, but ignores Megan when she asks where she is. Norton shares his bread and vegetables with them, and Abigail is happy to take a shower. Cassius finally manages to connect his laptop and look at old photos, revealing that his wife had been pregnant before the pandemic. When he goes to see Megan, she admits that she is scared because she hasn't felt the baby move since they arrived at the house. She makes him promise that if anything happens to her, he will protect her child. Later, Norton shares a drink with everyone and explains that he has lived there for 20 years, but his wife is no longer around. He has heard about the colony on the radio, but is not interested in joining them because he prefers solitude. Then Norton begins to rant about people who are too obsessed with returning to old customs and how humanity deserved the pandemic because they destroyed the planet and its ethics. He even compares the virus to evolution, saying that only the strong have survived. Cassius notices a strange knife on a table, but Norton snatches it away from him. Feeling increasingly ill, David rushes to the bathroom and notices that the infection is spreading. When he comes out, he discovers that his friends are unconscious because Norton, now wearing a lab coat and holding a strange machine, has added something to the drinks. He can tell that David is infected, and he activates the machine, which produces a sound that causes David to collapse in pain. Norton explains that the device is like a dog whistle that only works on the infected. Before David faints, the Horde finds the train station and continues its search. Moments later, David wakes up to find that the entire group has been tied up in a basement. Norton is there taking notes for his experiment and reveals that he has his infected wife locked in a cage. He lets her out and controls her with his device to make her attack the group. Cassius and Abigail kick her several times to hold her back, prompting the woman to go after David, who manages to break the ropes in a counterattack. They only struggle for a few seconds before David overpowers her, and Norton has to use his machine to prevent him from rescuing the others. However, David is not yet fully transformed, so he overcomes the pain and breaks the remaining ropes. Cassius finds a weapon and attempts to shoot Norton, who immediately flees. The group runs upstairs and closes the door behind them, at which point Norton begins beating it with an axe. Abigail steals Norton's car keys, and Cassius recovers his belongings before beating David. He wants to shoot him now, but the women convince him to wait. On the way to the car, Megan discovers that her power supply is broken. Norton comes out to watch the group leave while his wife growls at him. When the car reaches the forest, the Horde finally catches up with them and chases them. The group sees lights in the distance, meaning they have found the colony. They try to drive as fast as possible, but unfortunately the road is blocked by a tree, and they must continue on foot. The Horde is approaching, and they open fire, but David runs out of ammunition. Since he will transform anyway, he tells the others to go while he gains some time. The couple shares a heartfelt farewell, and before the trio departs, Cassius gives David his spare bullet. Once they are far enough away, David smokes his cigarette and begins fighting the wild creatures hand to hand, managing to defeat some of them. However, the large wild creature surprises him from behind and breaks his neck. The rest of the wild creatures chase the other survivors, so Abigail has to fire her weapon to protect Cassius while escorting Megan. She also begins screaming for help, which draws the attention of the guards at the colony's gate. They quickly shoot all the wild creatures chasing the trio. When the remainder of the horde sees the bodies and the lights, they immediately retreat back into the forest. Afterwards, the heroes manage to enter the colony, and Megan is taken to the infirmary where a midwife cares for her the next morning. After meeting the colony leader, Cassius tells Abigail that they should leave soon because humans cannot be trusted. However, Abigail is tired of running and ignores him. Then Cassius speaks with the midwife, who tells him that the baby is fine, but that the mother only has a few hours left. Cassius visits his friend and learns that the baby is a girl named Hope. Megan reminds him of his promise and gives him her family's locket before she dies. Meanwhile, Norton arrives at the forest and finds all the bodies, and he also gets a glimpse of the colony at that moment. The horde tries to attack him, but he immediately controls them with his device and announces that it is time for revenge back at the colony. Cassius is taking care of Hope and wonders what to do next. Abigail mingles with the local teenagers and joins a small party at night. Alcohol circulates and 2 guards fall asleep, so some teenagers seize the opportunity to enter a tunnel. Abigail follows them and discovers a strange remote control, but when she touches it, Roderick stops her. He explains that the entire fishing village is mined and that the remote control will trigger an explosion if the wild creatures manage to invade it. Humans can be safe from this blast by using a hatch in the ground that will take them to an abandoned dam the next morning. Norton sees a guard on a boat and asks him for help. After disposing of him, a wild creature jumps into the water and climbs onto the colony to kill the other guard as well. Now Norton can send the entire horde to attack while the survivors are slaughtered everywhere. A few armed individuals come out to fight, and Abigail saves Roderick from a wild creature before assigning tasks to the group of teenagers. Those with weapons must find a higher position from which to fire, and Roderick must guide the survivors to the dam while she searches for Cassius. As panic grips the colony, the midwife takes Hope away from Cassius so that he can go search for Abigail. The armed people begin to run out of ammunition, and the colony leader tries to flee, but a wild creature immediately kills him. Then Abigail and Cassius finally reunite and begin fighting the wild creatures together, using a combination of firearms and hand-to-hand combat. When they see an opening, they try to join the evacuation, but Cassius gets distracted when he sees Norton, and a wild creature knocks him down. Cassius manages to stab the creature, but Norton finds him and begins kicking him while talking about making the world safer. After a while, Cassius manages to stand up and pushes Norton against a wall, repeatedly smashing the device until it breaks. Then Cassius runs back to Abigail, while the wild creatures leap onto Norton to kill him. The survivors finish crossing the tunnel and reach the dam, so they ask Roderick to activate the explosives, but he hesitates because Abigail is still not out of the colony. A large wild wolf attempts to attack Abigail, so Cassius strikes it with an oar. When the creature falls, Abigail notices her bracelet and is horrified to realize that it belonged to her father. The shock leaves her frozen, and Cassius has to pull her out of that state and drag her to the hatch. The duo enters the tunnel just before Roderick grows tired of waiting and detonates the place, killing all the wild creatures in the colony. Afterwards, the survivors discover among them an infected man. As Cassius tries to calm him, a wild creature suddenly leaps out and kills the man, then turns to attack Cassius, triggering a fight. They beat each other continuously until they fall to the ground, where the wild creature nearly bites Cassius. This time, Abigail is patient and waits for the right moment to shoot. The survivors watch as the colony burns and wonder what to do next. Abigail tells them that they can build a new home at the dam, and Cassius reveals that he stole Norton's notebook containing instructions to build a generator.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.